Morning, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today is a special called workshop meeting of the Commissioners Court of Hood County, Texas. And today is Thursday, April the 10th, 2025, and we are in the Century Jury Room of the Ralph H. Walton Jr. Justice Center at 1200 West Pearl Street, Granbury, Texas. And we got the official chaplain of the Hood County Commissioners Court, the Right Reverend Mike McMahon, to give us the invocation.
Okay. Father, thank you for your love, for your provision. America is recovering, but pandemics, racial issues, job loss, political division, they've caused great suffering. We're called to be salt and light on the earth, and as Christians, we can heal our land through prayer and action. So let us come together, not just by words, but by a faith that produces works. The love and grace of God is turning the tide of America. We look to you and you only, Lord. Help us make wise decisions that move our country in the right direction. Help us to do our part in praying and in staying with what we know is right, according to the truth of your word. Teach us this morning and from here on as well to make our actions count, our words matter, and line them both up with your sense of rightness, not ours. Guide us with your eye, grip us with your strong arm. Teach us what we need to know to make our lives and our nation and Hood County count for you. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. And amen.
If you would please join me in the pledge of the United States. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pledge to the great state of Texas.
Honor the Texas flag. I
Pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, this is a workshop here, and we don't have enough of these public participation forms here, so if you want to speak, just go up and give your name to Christine, and she will put you in line to go ahead and you can come up and speak. But our first speaker here today is Tina Brown.
Are we not going to do some discussion? I don't know if I have questions or not.
Okay, you would rather, all right, well, it just so happens we have an expert here today that can run it all down for us and let us know. So,
Good.
Fire Marshal Jeff Young.
Judge, Commissioners, my first question would be, because I have a feeling I'm going to be up here for a while, would it be offensive if I sat at the table there and spoke into the microphone?
Yes, that's fine.
Because I have a feeling there's
Sure,
going to be
that's all right.
a lot of back and forth. So.
Yeah. We know that those knees are going out on you, so. Some of you older guys, I can kind of empathize.
TMB is a terrible thing. That's too many birthdays for those that don't know. So I have a feeling that the intent of this meeting may have been misunderstood by many. I didn't ask for this meeting specifically to talk about just best systems. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss fire code in general. So it's recently been brought to my attention. I've been under the understanding for years, and I've even asked the state fire marshal, when counties, smaller counties that don't meet the requirements of 250,000 people or touching one that does, when we could adopt or enforce fire codes. And I've never gotten a straight answer. In 15 years, I've asked that question. So it's been brought to my attention here recently that under Local Government Code 352.016, that actually gives all county fire marshals the authority to enforce any state-adopted fire code. So that is that, and that local government code is the same local government code that gives the county the authority to hire a fire marshal in the first place. So I guess here in the last 2 weeks, I've come to the understanding that I have the ability and the authority to enforce fire code. That fire code is not specific to just battery storage facilities. That is commercial, that is residential, that is, and to some extent, we have actually been doing some of that, because every time we go out and do a fireworks stand inspection, we have a fee schedule for the fire marshal's office to charge a fee for the inspection on fireworks stands. We have been asked in the past to come and do inspections on daycares, foster homes, and that is because the state requires them to have those fire inspections done to have their license to be a foster home or a daycare facility or something like that. And we have always done that as a courtesy. We've never charged a fee for that because the county has never adopted a fee schedule for doing those types of inspections. So with this new knowledge now of having the ability to enforce fire codes, what that would mean is we as the county would have to then adopt a fee schedule. I gave you an example of the fee schedule from Van Zandt County. That's not necessarily the one that I want to adopt. It's just an example of other fee schedules that are out there. But technically, we would have to have a fee schedule so that it's clear what's charged for the permit. We would have to come up with a permitting process and what those steps look like. And so my whole thing is, I wanted, and for those that don't know, I can't sit and talk to all of the commissioners and the judge at one time without doing a workshop. And it's hard for me to talk to them about anything like this because Kevin may have questions that Commissioner Eagle doesn't have, and Jack may have questions that Commissioner Samuelson doesn't have. And so being able to all of us sit here and have those same discussions at one time, this is my only avenue to do that. So that was my intent for asking for this meeting in the first place, is to see how far down this road we want to go. Now, I can tell you there are commercial structures in the county now that had, they were following fire code, they would have been required to be sprinkled, and they are not. And a lot of that is going to come down to just the utilities in general. If the water main that's on that property that they're building on does not support a suppression system, they then have to bring in a 10,000-gallon tank and keep that tank full, arm it with a fire pump that will run for 30 minutes or however long it takes for the fire departments to get there. So there are challenges. There is cost that involved with following fire code, the biggest of those being requiring sprinkles. So that's, I just wanted to come in and get a feel of the court on how you would like for me to proceed.
This is a difficult, we sat and hashed back and forth with a lot of the ideas here yesterday. There's a line here. What is one life worth? And I 100% understand that. Does that mean that we have to go out and stymie business? This will harm commerce to no small extent, to have to go in and put a Dollar General comes in and they've got to put a fire suppression. They're not going to be on a main out in the county where they can flow that kind of water pressure to maintain that fire suppression system. They're going to have to build a very expensive conglomeration to go with that. Golly, it's hard to say this, especially as a guy that's devoted so much of my life to putting out fires. If we wanted to protect lives, let's set all of our speed limits at 10 miles an hour. There are a lot more people dying out on the roadways every day. We can wrap everybody in bubble wrap and take care of every potential harm that may come somebody's way. But is that the job of government? Is that what we're here to do? And I have some serious reservations with this. Your department would have to grow significantly to start dealing with the permitting process, the inspection process, and I'm talking more on the residential commercial situation, and I even said this yesterday, multifamily units, I'm all about some kind of protections on multifamilies. In my perfect world, this would be a private endeavor. This would be the builder of a facility, whatever, goes out and hires an electrical inspector to come in and make sure that their electrical, that the wiring and everything meets code, and they take that certificate to the bank that's loaning them money to do this project, or to the insurance company that's going to insure it on the backside. And I understand that this is pie in the sky. This is not the situation that we live in now, but that's a much more reasonable way of approaching these kind of things. The people that are building these things have a huge investment in this. They don't want their stuff to burn up. They don't want to have to deal with the consequences of that stuff. It's in their best interest to make sure that these things are done right. It's in the best interest of the bank to make sure that that building is as protected as can be, and it's in the best interest of the insurance company. I've been in the construction business, dealt with code enforcement a lot of times, that it got pretty draconian, and it made, it's all good. It's all good intentions, but California got to be California by good intentions, doggone it. That's the part that concerns me, is when is too much government too much? And it's a concern I have. I'm not sold on fire code, and I would, like we discussed yesterday, what are the implications? What are the reaches? What are the drawbacks? Because it sounds very positive, but like I said, lowering all of our speed limits to 15 miles an hour would save far more lives than fire code will.
So one thing I will throw out there is, if everybody followed the rules and did what was right, most of us wouldn't have a job anyway, and there wouldn't be a need for fire code.
You are correct. You are correct. But, as far as, city codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes, and all that other stuff, I've kind of always been opposed to that stuff. It doesn't affect me. I mean, and is that really how, I should look at this thing? Where is cradle-to-grave government coming in too heavy-handed? And we can't wrap everybody in bubble wrap and live their lives for them and protect them in every single way.
Right.
And I don't know. There's a balance there, obviously. Like I said, with a multifamily, if you're going to build an apartment complex, you anticipate renters coming in. They don't know the construction of the building. They've never been involved in that. But again, that should be something that the bank and the insurance company should be able to, hey, we're not loaning you money unless you hired an electrical contractor that follows building codes. So,
sounds like you're describing the perfect world scenario.
And like I said, I know that this is pie in the sky and philosophical, but
Right.
So where are we where the rubber meets the road?
So let me tell you how this ties into the whole BEST thing, because I know there's a lot of people here that probably want to talk about the BEST project and all of that. So where this all came down is I've been asked and kind of nudged in the direction of making them 855 compliant, which NFPA 855 is the document that regulates battery storage. So if I'm going to enforce NFPA 855, where does the cherry picking stop? If I'm going to hold them to code, why would I not hold other commercial to code as well? And so and then you're talking about your NFPA 1, your NFPA 101, which is your life safety and building codes and all of that. So I don't want to be that guy that's seen as I'm just enforcing 855 to pick on and try to be the roadblock of this BEST plant. And let me just be clear up front. I'm not a fan of solar, batteries, any of that. However, who am I to dictate what they can and can't do on their property? And so I completely agree with what you're saying about oversight and overstepping and everything else. But if we're going to enforce fire code on one, I'm not going to cherry pick.
Yep.
Now, that also being said, in my meeting, for those of you that were here for the best thing, my meetings with them yesterday, their plan and their project for what they've explained, I haven't seen anything on paper yet, I'm just going to say, what they're proposing far exceeds anything that 855 is going to require anyway. And they have already asked for me and our office to be involved in the process so that they can give us their plans, they can show us the designs, all their stuff is already UL tested. They've offered all of that stuff and asked for us to be involved.
And that's
So-
for one of the projects that's happening in
That's for
in
one
Hood
of the
County.
two, correct.
We have multiple projects, but
Right.
thank you.
All I've had with Apache Hill is a conversation and told them that whatever their project is going to have to comply with 855. And I haven't heard anything back from them. That, of course, I just spoke to them last week, so maybe they're preparing their documents. I don't know.
I have a question. This is discussion, but I'm not sure you used it as an example a Dollar General that's already been put into place. I'm not sure that we would be able to go back after they relied on the law as it was at the time when they built their structure.
Correct.
And I think we have somebody up here sitting on this dais that's went through this some years ago. I don't know, I think we need to get a legal opinion on that particular issue as to whether, if we were to adopt the state fire code, would that require the fire marshal to go out retroactively and mandate that these businesses that have already been put in comply with it? And you've talked about they don't even have the infrastructure there. They would have to, I'm not sure that would fly.
So that would not be my intent to retrograde the application of the fire code.
Yeah,
So-
and
I don't think he meant that. I think he was
Yeah, I
talking
did.
about future development, if
Right.
that were.
So future development moving forward, yes, they would have to meet
That's-
code.
that's the
I
way
think
I
he
took
was
it.
asking about already existing facilities. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
you just brought that up, that you would have, that Dollar General, for instance, that you use, well, you'd have to go back out there, and maybe that was an example, but I don't think it would have to be for future.
Correct. So
Okay.
if we were to go out and find an egregious life hazard that we felt needed to be addressed right away, technically, by the way that law is written, yes, we could go out there and make them retrograde that. That would not be my intent. The way I would look at it is basically anything that already exists is grandfathered in. So unless they have a fire that causes damage to more than 30% of the building, or they want to do add-ons or something like that, then that code would then come into play. And to address what Kevin was saying about the stopping commerce and all of that stuff, I spoke with the Van Zandt County Fire Marshal, Kevin Palmer, and he was the one that kind of brought a lot of this stuff to light for me. Basically what he was telling me is everything that's out there now, if we signed off on it, if we allowed it to be built, we own it. If something happens to that facility or somebody dies in that building, they're going to come back and look at me first as a fire marshal, because why did I allow this to happen? And then my next explanation would be that we weren't enforcing fire codes, that wasn't the wish of our county at the time, and then they're going to come and look at, however litigation goes. Everybody knows they're going to look for somebody to blame. And the first person they come to is that person that should have been the one that made sure they were up to code.
And you're going to run over commission's court that might give you a piece. You wouldn't do that, do you?
Not at all.
Yeah,
One of the
I
examples.
think that's a little, I'm not sure about that.
So I'm not clear on.
There's some hyperbole in that one, so
Yeah, and
take
it-
that one with a grain of salt.
Like to speak? Judge?
Can I say something?
Judge?
Go ahead.
So I want to emphasize, It's 12,000 feet or less does not meet that code. They do not have to have sprinklers in that enforcement. And in small towns, that's typically where you're looking at large capacity or danger, like a warehouse or nightclub. So more than likely, your Dollar General doesn't meet those parameters and things like that. So you're looking at 12,000 feet or higher with high capacity load or risk of fire, like a warehouse or nightclub and things like that. I just want to emphasize that further.
May I ask who you are?
I'm from Van Zandt County. My name is Nancy White. I work
Nancy?
directly, Nancy, yes, sir. I work with my fire marshal quite closely. So this is one of the things that came up in our county. This does not meet every business in small towns, especially like he stated. It's different in small towns. You're looking at larger capacity probability of harm to people that you have to enforce and ensure safety. Like if you're going to have 500 people in one building, you're going to need to protect them. That's part of the county's requirement, is to ensure safety and welfare. But if it's below 12,000, then you have less probability of that being an occurrence and less probability of harm to individual. Does that make sense?
And is that in the local government code 352?
That
where
is
it
our
states-
state fire code. That is specifically from what Texas has adopted in our state fire code, and I can provide that to you as well. That is
part's
state
in
of Texas.
That part's in the building code,
That's in the NFPA?
the 1 or 101 or both.
I believe it's one. I think it is one.
Yeah.
Okay. So it wouldn't apply to if someone wanted to open a small business?
No, not
with-
unless it's a direct threat. So like if they're opening a small business, would say like they're doing helium, for instance, which is flammable, and you have a ton of helium tanks in there. That's a different thing. He would go in and step in and enforce that these two things are not next to each other that are flammable. Really and truthfully, I don't think people truly understand the power of a fire marshal and what they can do for a county. And they have great potential of protection if given the ability to do that and enforce it.
Yeah, I think that what Commissioner Andrews is worried about is the overstepping of regulation and government. And
Yeah.
from my perspective, as our fire marshal said, and as you know, this is all really new to
Yes.
us, and we haven't, well, I haven't had time to research all of it, but I think that what I would hope for is that there's a balance of not over-regulating small businesses, but also protecting the public from the real risks. And so, there's a risk assessment, what's the probability and what's the impact?
Which is
And I-
exactly what he would determine. So if it's under 12,000, really, you got to look at it this way. If you have a good fire marshal, which it seems to me like you do, then he's not going to be a tyrant and power hungry. He wants to ensure safety, not control. That's what you're looking at. And even then, of course, he leaves that position, it's already in place. That's where checks and balances comes into place in my mind. You keep everybody, you hire the county fire marshal. Who you hire dictates enforcement as well. But in the end, 12,000 or higher is your set parameter. Small businesses, unless they have certain specifications, do not fall into a safety threat 9 times out of 10. A lawyer opens a new business, it's 12,000 feet, but there's no risk of concern, no issue. You open a fireworks stand that's only 100 feet, well, now you have a different parameter now. So it's based off of the merits of that particular build and based off of safety and welfare of those people nearby and within. So not everything's the same.
Do you know how many employees the fire marshal has in Van Zandt County?
Oh, we are significantly understaffed, and we are fighting for that. There are 2, including himself, and he's supposed to have 10. He works a lot.
So who processes, we have your fee schedule and your permanent schedule, so who processes all that?
Him and the one other person in the office. And they work closely with the treasurer as well,
And
or the auditor.
do you know what the volume is? Like, are there 10 a month or 100 a month, or?
It has to be at least 3. I don't know the exact amount that they have to do a month, but I want to say it's at least 3. Or he may know that answer better than I about how many they're supposed to do a month or a year, because I know he's looked at that.
Oh,
but
I
that
mean,
one's-
how many businesses are having to go through the permit process a month? Like,
It's
what's the?
every new business,
growth?
isn't it? Has to go through the process based off of the parameters, yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
but what's
but
your
what's-
growth?
yeah,
Are you
what-
bringing
Our
in-
growth,
Yeah, are you
we are
bringing in
not,
12?
we're right outside of Kaufman County, which is a booming one, so they're expanding into ours, and so the growth is, put it this way, Kaufman County is one of the largest growing counties in the state of Texas right now, and it's
It's-
expanding into Van Zandt County right next to it. So
trickling,
it's
yeah.
quite significant, but again, it's an ebb and flow. Right now, for instance, we have 7 battery builds, 2 solar farms, and 1 mining. That's just those builds right there. That's not including your restaurants, your feed stores. We have other businesses coming in, so it's based off of that.
Yeah, so my question is what is the volume of paperwork that's having to go through the fire marshal's department based on this fee schedule?
That is not something he has told me. I don't have that.
Okay.
That's out of my scope. I can text him and ask him, but I do know that it's getting handled. I don't know, and that's with 2 people, so it doesn't
Okay.
seem to overwhelm him in that regard. At least not enough to say it.
So you're,
You have presently 2 employees in your fire marshal's office,
Him and 1 other, yes.
and you said they said we need 10. Who's they?
The state of Texas actually states that a fire marshal should have a total of 10, including self.
based on population, or?
It's not population, I don't think. I think it's just state code, that they're supposed to have 10 people working within that office.
And I'm not asking for 10.
He's not asking for
just
10
saying.
either. He only asked for
Yeah,
6.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Send that.
Yeah, I'll get Palmer to get it to me and I'll send it to you.
I can't believe that a county, like the smallest county in the state, they would get
Yes.
10, and then, like Hood County, they'd get 10 too. That doesn't make sense to me, but
well, the smallest county in the state doesn't even have 10 people. Isn't it like 4?
Yeah.
Now, so for me, I will say, 2 of my part-time employees, 2 of my part-time fire marshals are inspectors, and they hold their certificates for all of that. I could use them in the time that you guys have already given me on the Mondays and Fridays to have, I've got the payroll to cover that. I could have those 2 guys do my plans examining and all of that stuff, and just see where that goes. If it gets to the point that it's overwhelming, then I might come and ask for another full-time employee that's all they do is plans examining and inspections. But I don't know. I don't think I'm there yet.
Are daycare centers exempt from this fire code deal?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. The state is pushing really, really hard on daycares. And so,
Kids in there.
yes.
all over the place. If you drive down 377 to Stephenville, you see a number of daycare centers come out. That's
So here's the thing with daycares, and this is what I've been told from the state fire marshal. It doesn't matter if it's a 500 square foot room for 3 kids or a 1,500 square foot for 100. Every daycare now is required to have a sprinkler and a monitored alarm system, regardless of size, regardless of how many kids, and that is required. They're going to have that before they get their license from the state.
that's under separate section of the code then.
Correct.
So could we write our fire code to say that with those parameters, similar to, what was your name again? Nancy. What, some risk assessment, if it's this,
So-
this large and it has these risks, then yes, you have to come and apply for a permit. But
So
if
just
it's
to be
under
clear-
this, then no.
Just to be clear, we are not writing fire code. The fire
Okay.
code already
Our
exists.
policy.
What we would have to do is decide if we are going to have a fee schedule and a permit process for us to enforce the code.
Okay.
So I want to throw this back into the mix, too. I know that we're speaking of the fire code in general, and I've heard Commissioner Andrews I share his concerns, but I want to point this out. I pulled up some stuff on myths regarding the battery energy storage centers. Here's a myth that this is from a Baker Risk company. There are standards that risk managers and facilities managers can use to guide them toward creating policies and processes. They're saying that's a myth, and here's their explanation. Although standards like the NFPA 855 have been published and continue to be refined, there are fewer standards and forms of guidance regarding ESS compared to other industries. With interest in BESS steadily increasing and the decrease in lithium-ion battery prices, standards are being quickly created and revised as we speak. However, The BESS industry is still in its infancy compared to the nuclear industry, for instance. And policy creation is ongoing. For this reason, working with risk engineering organizations is especially important to develop safe process and risk assessments for your facility. And I put that, there's other ones too that we may get to later, but if you look at what's going on in the legislature right now, I'm looking at 4 different bills that have been proposed by the House, well, one Senate bill, HB 1343, HB 1378, HB 4363, and SB, Senate Bill 1825. And this is all having to do with setting up procedures and standards, not banning them, but making them, basically calling on that industry to develop the standards and procedures to be safe in your area. And so, from my perspective, we're in an infancy. You know, we don't know what all's going on with these things yet. We don't know the potential, in my opinion.
We don't know what we don't know.
We don't know what we don't know. And so, and once they're in here, they're in here. So I want to get that down because it's certainly a topic. I appreciate the private property idea that, you know, a person should be able to do what they want with their private property, but there are limitations when you get to the boundary line of that property. And if there's a potential, and we're not talking, somebody brought up the other day about your cell phone has a lithium battery in it. Well, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a huge conglomeration of this material that we really don't have enough information yet to understand what the potential downside might be. So that's kind of my response. And I will say that, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I just pulled it up yesterday, and they've changed my state bar page where I can't get this case pulled up yet, but the case is Crosstex v. Gardner, and it's a nuisance case, and it goes through the entire history of nuisance in Texas, and it's basically about a noise issue. So I'm looking forward to reading this case, but I think there's a lot of research and discussion that needs to be done on whether to adopt a state fire code and what that's going to really mean, and the fee schedules and everything else. I don't think we're going to do this, and this is going to take some time, in my opinion, and discussion.
Yes.
I think so too, and that's why I think it's good that we're starting out, you know, with this informative workshop, and surely we'll get some other information and opinions. But Commissioner Andrews, I'm just sitting here thinking about the other issue that came up a few months ago where someone on their private property was using PFAS chemicals on their own property. Well, we all agreed that that was an issue, that they're putting
Rain
in.
happens and it washes that over to the next property,
Right.
which is exactly what happened in Johnson County.
Right.
And
But
again,
we don't know what we don't know is what happens when there's a fire and those chemicals go up in the air, they dissipate throughout the county, their neighboring, or the chemicals leach in the soil. So those are the things we don't know yet, and it may not be a similar situation to the PFAS, but it could potentially be.
you know, I was in favor of looking at PFAS regulation. That is a spreading situation. It is just like in Johnson County. They put it on this field, it washed down the valley into that guy's pond and caused much
Dead
destruction
animals.
on his property. And again, I was very specific in that resolution not to ask for the prohibition of using the fertilizer, but asking for some regulation on the harmful chemicals in the fertilizer. And that, I see that as a very, very different issue. The EE folks, heck, I spent the better part of the day yesterday between the two meetings on this deal. And I think that they, in some ways, validated my point that they have a huge investment in this. They're spending gobs of money to put these things out there. And what these guys have realized is we have to have a way to deal with something when there's a fault that occurs in that system. It takes it off the grid, it shuts it down, it vents it, it burns the, it's got igniters on top that burn the harmful chemical coming out of that container. It, basically neutralizes it and makes sure that that fire is contained to that container. And
Actually, it works to prevent the fire in the first place so that there's not one.
And they've even gone and developed different foams and linings and stuff that end up being fire suppression inside those things. And it, again, the insurance company that's insuring this stuff, they're wanting something done about this. And again, this is I keep going back to this as a private market issue that they have a huge investment in this. They've got to protect their investment. The insurance company has got to protect themselves from this. And again, there are potentials for bad actors. There always have been in the history of the world.
Right, and I think that thank you for European Energy for coming and spending some time with us yesterday and explaining all the steps that they're going through to be above the NFPA standards. But we can't guarantee that every project that's going to come in here is going to do that. And if, in the example of European Energy, it's no issue to them. If we were to adopt this NFPA 855 standard, it wouldn't be any issue because they're already above it. So I don't see that it.
I'm sorry, again, I'm not trying to correct you.
Am I saying it wrong?
We're not adopting code.
Okay.
The code already exists.
But
We're not writing code.
But
We are deciding whether or not I'm going to enforce the code.
enforce it instead of adopt it.
What we would have to adopt is a fee schedule that we have developed, not necessarily this one, but we would have to develop a fee schedule and a permitting process. That's what this boils down to.
But it wouldn't be any issue for them because
Correct.
they're already above
Correct.
what the standard would be. So we can't guarantee that any other project that comes in here is going to be as
Forthcoming.
Yes, thank you for that word. So,
Okay, Ms. Hightower wants to speak.
Yes, my name is Cindy Highsmith, and I live in Pecan Plantation. And I really appreciate our fire marshal having this workshop. I'm glad that he is wanting to be on top of this, be proactive instead of reactive, because who stands to be hurt by a best fire the most are the firefighters. They're the ones who will be out there on the front line. And do they have hazmat equipment? Do they have that PPE? Are they going to have to be calling for a hazmat unit that's an hour away? When we're talking about the Rain Lily project, what scares me so much about it, and I'm very disappointed that I'm not seeing, one of the commissioners from, or maybe I am,
no.
from Somerville County.
He was not able to come.
He couldn't come, okay. Well, so if there were a fire there, and I'm not saying there will be, I'm not saying that, but if there were a fire, the first responders would be the Glen Rose Fire Department. They're 13 miles away. Then the closest is Indian Harbor here in Hood County. That's 25 miles away. Pecan Plantation is 27 miles away. So does this make me, who lives directly across on the river, who will be directly across from this BEST, does this make me feel good? No, this scares me. Am I saying it's going to happen? No. But let's just be honest about this. We already have one that is 4 miles away from our marina in Pecan Plantation. That's the Vistra one. And I wish that it worked the way that Commissioner Andrews is saying. But see, air doesn't understand the boundary. Air just moves. And if we have a big wind and there were to be a fire at the Vistra facility or over at Rain Lily and the wind were blowing, it could go all over everybody in Pecan Plantation. As I've told our fire marshal, I know nothing about fire. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should stay in my house. I don't know if I need to get in my car. And if the back gate is blocked and we have to all get out the front gate and we're all old people and we're all trying to get in our cars, God forbid, trying to get out. So does it scare me? Yes. I want you to take this very, very seriously. I'm not trying to infringe on a property owner's rights. I like having my property rights, but air doesn't understand that. And, you know, when you're talking about the firefighters, you know, their bodies, why do you think these firefighters get cancer and get sick? And it's because they are on the front lines and they are handling this.
And not to belittle the point, but the crap that we build houses out of nowadays, it is extraordinarily toxic when it burns. Every fire that goes off is releasing toxins like crazy. That's why so many firefighters end up with cancers and stuff like that.
But ours don't have hazardous fire
oh yeah, your couch
protection.
cushion, you set that thing on fire, it's bad. The carpet in your home, the insulation, you know, these things are horribly toxic when they catch.
Okay, but let's talk about this BEST. Yeah, I want to talk about the BEST. Fire Commissioner Andrews is okay, so if there's a Tesla catches on fire, okay, and that's a cell in one of those containers, and they look innocuous. When you look at those BESTs, they just look like a container, but what's in them? So in one section of it, you have 200 of those cells, and so what can our fire marshal and his firefighters do? Well, they can't do diddly squat. They just have to let it burn, just let it burn out. I mean, that's what's every fire that John and my husband and I have read about, and we've done extensive research on it. They say just secure the perimeter and then let it burn out. Well, what's coming on to all of us? And I'm scared about it, and I want y'all to really start looking at this and taking this real seriously. And you know what I've learned in life? And it took me a while to learn it, but I've learned how to say no. I've learned to say no. And there's things that just are not right in life, and you just have to say no. And putting firefighters, and we have a volunteer fire department, I'm always there. If the money well spent is money on these guys, and we can't be cheap on them. Okay,
I think the scale, just to your example, Commissioner Andrews, the scale is the difference. The one house with burning versus what the potential is for a 800-acre, and I'm not specifically talking about Rain Lily, but any other that come in, the number of acres, they're not doing this on 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, 4 acres. They're doing this on hundreds and sometimes thousands of acres. And you put all of those batteries, and the scale of that burn and that toxicity is, I would say, different than one house.
And we're not necessarily talking about one house. What about the rope factory down here? All the toxins that were in that rope factory, boy, that was some serious stuff came out of that. How long were we out there on that fire? Heck, I think I was there.
Couple of days.
I think I was there for 9 hours or so with a tanker.
Yeah.
We can't mitigate every potential harm. Now, again, reasonable oversight, reasonable regulation, let the free market. With this EE situation, the free market has established the guidelines. They've came in and gone over and above the 855. They've done that voluntarily because it protects their investment as well. You know, there's a lot of prevention. Yes, there were things in the past that have happened that they've learned from and advanced. And I don't know.
Well, and using Equibrand as an example, let me put that one into perspective. That's a rope factory. It wasn't a whole bunch of batteries or wasn't anything like that. Within an hour of that fire, we had EPA air monitoring and groundwater quality monitoring on site. That was monitoring what was going into the ground and monitoring the air and if there was any potential hazard to the community around us. So if we're going to call EPA and have air quality monitoring and all of that stuff for a rope factory fire, I can guarantee we're going to have the same response to anything else, regardless of whether it's a battery plant, an oil plant, or whatever. If we see the potential for there to be harm to the community and the citizens that live in our county, we are going to call the appropriate people to come out and make sure that we are doing our best to protect them.
This young lady was speaking back there. Go ahead, state your name.
It's Jessica Hall. I live in Pecan Plantation as well. There's a huge difference between how these fires affect people versus a home being on fire. That's bad enough. The NFPA 855 is your only way, if you enforce it, to protect everyone in our community and to protect the firefighters. It gives them the ability to have resources like hazmat and those things. It's your only way that you have to enforce these companies to make sure that they do what they say. They can tell you things all day long that they're going to be in compliance, that they're going to use this certain battery or that. But if you don't enforce this code, then they can do whatever they want. It's they own part of that property over there, and they can put on there whatever they'd like to. The type of batteries that they're talking about using is the lithium iron phosphate, the LFPs, and those do have the potential to go into thermal runaway and to overheat. All right? In Moss Landing, we've all heard about it, you know, huge disaster. That caught on fire not once but 3 times. All right, they had to evacuate. I think their radius was 7 miles. They're now finding chemicals in their water, miles and miles out from that. People in their home are having to test their homes. Heavy metals are in the water and in dust in their homes from that fire. People are having severe side effects from those fires. And that's not the only one. There have been 27 instances of events, and 3 of them were Moss Landing, 3 of them were another one, I think it's like Eagle Pass or something in Oregon. And one of the problems that the firefighters have is even if they go in and they contain it and it is completely put out, it can reignite. That's in there. That's documented. They know that. So it's really hazardous. These batteries, when they charge and discharge, have the ability to start heating up, and when that happens, they start off-gassing, which is when you have the real dangerous situation of where explosion or they can ignite into the fires and go into runaway and all that other stuff. All right, when they start to off-gas, what these companies will have to do is they have to ventilate somehow so that there isn't an explosion event under the 855. Well, if they do that, those gases are going somewhere. Also, like was mentioned before, the available fire department to come out is 13, 14 miles away, and that's as the crow flies, you know, not traffic or anything else. Well, by the time they get out and they've decided
how to proceed and whether they need to evacuate or not, I'm right across the street from this. Okay, my animals are right across the street from this. By that point, we're gonna already be exposed to whatever's happening over there. I live across from that gas refinery, and when they decommissioned it, our house shook. My windows shook, and there was tons of black smoke coming out of there. We called the non-emergency line. They didn't even know what was going on. They had no idea. They didn't say, oh yeah, they're decommissioning, or, they had no idea. So we can't treat this just like it's a house or a small business or anything else. This is your only way to be able to get, I know that they've talked to y'all and they're providing some information, and that's wonderful. This is your only way to have a legal right to be able to enforce anything, and for the county to have information and for us to be informed, right? It's been 2 years, and a question was asked at our town hall. Y'all don't even know how many square feet the battery storage facility is. At least you haven't shared it with us. It's been 2 years. How big is it going to be? How many square feet is the facility going to be? Also, he mentioned the water. They do have to have, if you follow the 855, then they do have to have enough water on there. And that's important, because how many grass fires do we have? Glen Rose, huge portion of it burned, I think a couple of years ago. And then we had a grass fire by our front gate. I mean, those happen. And that's why they have to keep water, is to keep the containers cool and to prevent other types of fires from the grass and the brush and all of those things. So I think it's really important. I think if the county doesn't enforce the 855, then you're going to be doing a disservice to every single person who lives here and to your firefighting department, whoever's going to be out there. So I didn't prepare today, so I think I mentioned that there was at least 27 events that happened. Those are just of the ones that are self-reporting. That's it. Right? Like Mr. Dave Eagle said, this is newer, and we need to be able to make sure and enforce that they're following what they say they're going to do, especially because they're in a sensitive area. You have the river 3 sides around, and you have thousands of homes all around it. This isn't in a field next to no one, in the middle of nowhere. There's people here, so please think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Who's next?
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Fayol. I live in Pecan Plantation. And I've lived in Pecan Plantation for 4 years now, moved from the San Francisco Bay Area. I know we're the people you don't want to talk to, but my husband and I lost our home in the Berkeley Oakland Hills fire. 3,000 dwellings were lost, 25 lives were lost. And I was struck last summer in the pecan plantation when the wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour, and we have dead pecan trees sitting, and we are a tinderbox in pecan, and we have 2 ways out. So I don't know what's being done to help the citizens, and I'm really passionate about the people who just spoke, because I posted this on Nextdoor and they laughed it off. It was an attitude like, oh, that could never happen. You could never have winds that would create a chemical storm or a fire that would take out a whole group of homes, but it can happen. I've been in it. It's a devastating experience to go through, and I think we need to be smart about this. You need to look forward in terms of how we're going to fight something that could happen like this. How do we get out of Pecan? I'm lucky I'm at the front gate. I can go through the river. But this is a real situation, and I think we need to take care of what's happening. Thank you.
Tina Brown, are you ready to talk now or not?
So I know this is about code. So there's a state code, and we're not required to follow it. I thought counties had to follow state code. So, but we don't have to follow it. We have to adopt it to follow it. I'm kind of confused. If there's
Enforcement.
It's just the enforcement part. And
okay,
coming
so
up
we
with a
have
fee schedule.
adopted the code. Okay, so
The states, these are state adopted codes.
that
so-
we don't follow unless we also adopt them.
It's not necessarily that we don't follow them, we don't enforce them.
Okay, that's
I think her question is,
confusing.
how do we have the option not to enforce them?
Right.
Which was kind of the point of me asking for this meeting in the first place.
What does a county that doesn't have a fire marshal do?
The DA takes over that role. They become the authority having jurisdiction.
So they're-
You get a,
The DA takes the role. They become the authority having jurisdiction when there's no fire marshal. It's the district attorney.
I dare say that's not getting enforced. Just, sorry.
He's probably not going out and doing inspections,
Yeah,
for
I'm kind of
sure.
thinking probably not, but
So as far as compliance, I mean, if we did adopt this
the
code
fee schedule.
and a fee, well, the policy, the fee schedule and everything, and he goes out and inspects it, are there more inspections, like regular inspections, to make sure that they are? Because like she said, people say whatever, like this Bitcoin, it was going to be a data center. Now it's a Bitcoin. So they didn't follow what they said. And is there anything we can do after? Yeah, it was called a data center when it first
Well, I
came to
think
court.
technically a
I thought they came out
Bitcoin is a
saying-
data center. It's a Bitcoin
Right,
data center.
But still, I mean, they kind of said one thing and meant something else, and we were not, because we didn't know what was going on. You
I
know, we
didn't know
don't know what we don't know.
Bitcoin meant, but I knew that it was a Bitcoin facility at the beginning. I didn't know it meant all that horrendous
and-
noise or whatever, but I knew it was Bitcoin from the very beginning.
Okay, I don't
Oh,
think so.
sorry, I
I mean,
guess
I'd have to go
that's
back
it,
and
yeah.
rewatch
Okay,
it, but I have watched it since, and it was definitely called a data center, not a Bitcoin. And so, you know, I just don't, I mean, if we're going to put these perimeters on there, and are we going to go back and reinspect? No? How do we know they're even compliant?
I think there is a
After
schedule,
the
it's
fact.
part of your schedule, right? If you were to create a fee schedule, there would be a permit fee, an inspection fee, I don't know, re-inspection fee. What are you thinking?
That would kind of be for us to work through and decide how we want to make that work.
Yeah, typically you have somebody come out and inspect your fire extinguishers, make sure that they're still in date, and your suppression system will have a routine inspection done on it. That's usually a private company that comes out and does that, not the fire marshal's office doing those inspections, correct?
For like the fire extinguishers and that kind of stuff,
Yes.
yes, that is an independent company that will come out and do the inspections on those fire extinguishers. So what the fire marshal's office would do would go out and see that those inspections have been done.
Right.
And so if it's not tagged with a recent tag that it has been inspected, then that's when you would start with your yellow tags, red tags, whatever, put them on notice that, hey, this needs to be done, and we're going to come back and make sure it gets done.
Same with a sprinkler?
Same with a sprinkler.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I'm going to tag on to what Ms. Brown is asking, or is, okay, if the state adopted these codes, by default, they apply to counties. If we're not enforcing the codes and something happens and a building burns and somebody dies or multiple people die and we haven't enforced the code, then what?
That is the whole point of me asking for this in the first place. Where does the liability fall?
Is that what you were asking?
Well, partly, yeah. It's like, and still, like she said, it's like, are we going to, after the fact, continue to monitor whether or not they're following the rules? Because, you know, people don't follow the rules. You know, we don't drive the speed limit. So if we're going to, is that not in the state codes to verify after the fact? I mean, is that something we can't even add on because it's not part of state code? I don't.
can't tell you what the state code says, but in the city of Granbury, they require yearly inspections to all the commercial buildings. The city fire inspector goes and does a yearly inspection to make sure everything is getting inspected.
But those are city codes.
Or that would be the follow-up inspection. In other words, you put this system in, it's required to be tested yearly by an independent party and that fire inspector goes out and inspects it yearly and signs off that the business did what they were supposed to do.
And I understand that, but that's written into city codes, right? Yes, those codes are written into city. That's not state codes. And all we can follow is state codes. So if state codes don't have something in there that says we can go back and verify that they're doing all this on a yearly basis or quarterly or every 5 years or something, if there's nothing in the state code, can we actually do that? Because state doesn't allow counties to make their own decisions.
So there is inspection measures in fire code.
There's section, which one?
There is stuff in fire code that we could go out and do those annual inspections.
Okay.
Can you enforce the 855, is that right?
So the 855 is just the compliance to bring, those are the steps that they would have to meet for a BES. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go out and do an annual inspection of their stuff. I don't know that it, and I've got to be honest, I haven't spent a whole lot of time reading code before this because I was under the impression that it didn't apply. I was under the impression that because we don't have that 250,000 population or touch a county that does, that there wasn't anything I could do. I even, like I say earlier, I asked the state fire marshal at a conference a couple years back how we could do that, and she didn't know the answer.
So
You asked the AG for, get with the,
Well, I thought being that I was asking the state fire marshal if I could enforce codes, that she would probably be the person that would know the answer to that question, and she didn't.
well, that's what I mean. Then you'd have to go to the Attorney General to
Right.
get an interpretation. So you may get
And I'll tell you, this is a question
Matt
I've
Mills
been
of
asking
his
for years.
office to ask the question about that.
Yes, Jay and I had a conversation, Mr. Quine and I had that conversation yesterday, and I asked for his interpretation, and he said, yes, the way I read that, you have the authority to enforce that code.
Okay. Yes,
the
Ms.
authority. So on,
That's what Commissioner.
Can you come up to the mic?
Tina was in the
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah, Tina.
Weren't you?
okay, so she just handed me this form that they have done, but is this part of state code?
That's the adoption.
But this right here, reinspection, is that in the state code, or is that just your county?
Yes, there is inspection measures in state code. That is a copy of their fee schedule.
Yes.
For what Van Zant County adopted on what they are going to charge for permitting and inspections.
Okay. I did look over this policy, this state code, and, of course, it's in state language. It's hard to, I mean, it's like, I was just like looking for it, like, one, has to be done, two, I mean, is it?
Oh, no, it's not that
I know,
simple.
but can somebody dumb it down for all of us and just put it on a piece of paper and say, you
I would
have to
ask-
follow this, you have to do this, you have to do this, and you have to do this?
I would ask the same question, because I'll tell you, just reading through code,
I know. it's
first off,
awful.
we have to make sure it's a state-adopted code. So the state has not adopted all of the NFPA codes. So 855, I did check, that is one that they have adopted. NFPA 850, which is the generation, so that's your power plants and all that stuff, the state has not adopted 850. They've adopted 855, which is your battery storage facilities, but not 850. So what we would then have to do is go through and make sure that whatever state code we're wanting to look at, it's got to be state adopted and apply. And reading the state code, so the ones that I know are in is NFPA 1, 101, 13, which deals with sprinkler systems, 855. Those are the ones that I've looked at recently just to make sure that those are adopted. Reading through those codes, as you're reading through, like the whole first chapter is nothing but definitions. It's like, this is what an AHJ is. This is what it just outlines all the definitions. And then as you're reading through that code, it'll say, this applies as per chapter 9. And then you read through all of those, and it's bouncing you from code to that code, to this chapter. You get down to that chapter, and it says, refer back to chapter 2. So now it is a hunt and peck. Finding the path to the code that you want to enforce is not a simple, it's not a simple deal. It's not written in plain, easy English. It's not a step 1, step 2, step 3.
How many other
That's
counties
why
have
I
adopted
was saying,
this?
maybe you write to both the state fire marshal and the AG at the same time after you get the questions that you need to answer. help get Alan or Matt Mills to help you with that, and at least be sending it off, so we got something
Right.
in the mill.
So the thing about these codes, they're national codes that were adopted by the state. And these national codes are being looked at, changed, upgraded, enhanced all the time. So, and you might be able to correct me, because I think right now what they're working off of is the 2021 version, or is 23? So it's the 23 version in FPA.
Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So incidentally, I find it interesting something you said, because my tag on my TV show is "What do you not know that you do not know?" And I want to emphasize that. I'm going to say everything that I'm about to say, I have evidence to support. So first and foremost, Moss Landing was brought up. I want to be clear and evident that these batteries are not the same of what you're getting. These are nickel, manganese, cobalt is what went off recently. However, their 2021 fire was lithium ion phosphate. I actually have a spreadsheet that our fire marshal compiled. It's got more than 56 runaways that have occurred since 2020. It is now April of 2025. They even have Newslinks articles. And one of the things I said to the governor in our meeting last week is, if you had a spreadsheet with 56 fires and 60% of the time was due to control systems or equipment within, and 40% of the time was no known root cause, would you still have that equipment operational? We all know the answer to that. Here's the thing, is they're not in a solid database. So one of the things we told Abbott is we highly recommend that you put all of these in one database so you can see what the failing is in each one and be able to say, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this. But if it keeps doing it, obviously the technology needs to be put to a halt until it is ready. Additionally, going back to Moss Landing, the impact zone to environment was 30 miles. I have the lab reports for the record of nickel, manganese, cobalt were in there, but there were also thousands of microns of impact of lithium and arsenic. Now, this is important because lithium is the lower property in these batteries and yet still had significant impact, because lithium, when it goes into runaway, emits 7 toxic gases. Now, going back to EPA. EPA openly acknowledges that they do not know how to test for all of the gases. They only know how to test for 2. So while the reports are saying free and clear, they're also stating we can't test for all of it. Additionally, the sensor that was closest to the impact zone failed, and this is not the first time that their sensors have failed. At Fredericktown, Missouri, October of 2024, they had 22 sensors. 7 of the downwind sensors were what were released. The other 15 were not released, and they openly acknowledged that 9 of them failed. Keep in mind, they can't even test for all of the gases that are emitted. And you're looking at carbon monoxide, hydrofluoric acid, hydrofluoric cyanide. You're looking at very toxic. This is why we have to get out, because they're silent and deadly. With that said, 8 miles out from Moss Landing, I can get you direct contact, and you can even see her on my TV show, Heather Griffin. She tested positive along with more than 15 other individuals with lithium poisoning in her blood. That's in her blood. Lab reports show that. I have them as well. As far as the water that was mentioned, they tested water wells that were clear and free, no issue prior, testings done yearly, as they stated, arsenic and lithium at heavy micron, 1,000 micron levels, polluted the water wells.
8 miles?
8 miles. And if you go onto Moss Landing's Facebook page, they actually have a symptom check-in, and they also did their environmental assessment lab test. And if you overlay them, and I can provide this to you, you'll see that it's 30 miles out of impact. Of course, not into the water. But with that, the San Jose University was already testing the protected areas, the sloughs and others out there, and their test results show that they were also polluted significantly from this fire. With that said, farmers also with no prior issues with livestock had multiple stillbirths in their cattle and other livestock. So we do not know the long-term implications of this, but we do know that right now as it sits, there's been more than 55 in 5 years. That's 11 minimum cases a year. So it's not a probability that's super low. And on top of that, the fire department needs hazmat suits. So while the 1824 and 1825 that Mr. Eagle brought up over here, those covered the permits, regulations, and the gear required, but the one thing that I think would be the best to stop this overall is take the money away, take away the incentives. And right now, as of April 4th, our Department of Energy, not ours because we don't actually connect to their grid, Washington, they recalled $529 million paid out through the Inflation Reduction Act for green energy, including solar, wind, and battery. On top of that, our president on the 8th issued an executive order in reference to the infrastructure and grid safety. There have been multiple movements going on. And look, we can wait for them to do it all day long. We want them to succeed and ensure safety, but at a local level, if we wait and have these come in at masses, there's more than 900 planned in Texas. We shouldn't wait to find out. We should be ensuring safety and welfare. So while they say they are meeting code, until you look at that and verify 100%, you don't know that to be true. And I say that with all due respect. They told us they were meeting our code. Our fire marshal, as of yesterday, they have issued a temporary restraining order with a stop build injunction. Our fire marshal, our DA, because we didn't have a fire marshal at the time, sent the first request of verification that they were meeting codes. They didn't send everything. They sent a second one. They still didn't send everything. The fire marshal issued a fire marshal order with everything to be returned on Monday this week. One of the things that they did not approve is they didn't have a site-specific emergency plan. For instance, how do we prepare for this specific location? Additionally, the UL, the underwriter laboratory testing, they said that they did everything. They already requested their batteries. Come to find out, they didn't pass testing. And on top of that, they did not get it tested through a proper underwriting laboratory approved location. So even though they say it, verify, because we're verifying that they are not meeting that, and that's why the temporary restraining order, because they didn't even provide all the information requested through the 855, and additionally, what they did provide was insufficient. I think that this technology has great potential. I work with security of the grid. I think it has great potential in the long run. Unfortunately, the cons outweigh the pros. The technology is not ready. I'm in a lot of conversations about this, but as it sits, there's good actors, but there's way more bad actors, and it comes down to money right now. And it comes down to the 2022 tax amendment code that Biden-Harris administration did, which, again, tax code isn't fun for everyone to read, but incidentally, I'm a nerd who likes to read legislation and tax codes. And I read it. And what you're looking at is they got for a $100 million build, they start with a $500,000 tax incentive that is transferable to anyone for up to 7 years. Their incentives are far and beyond. And on top of that, our taxpayer subsidies are paying for that. So I'm going to leave you with a quote from the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. He said, "Solar, wind, batteries, and transmission are a colossal failure to the American people. They've cost the American taxpayers trillions of dollars for 3% of energy. It has increased the cost of electricity and decreased the cost or the reliability of our grid. The truth is we are paying them on the merits of other industries. They are not meeting their demand, and actually they are negatively producing, because if you think about your AC, when your AC kicks in your house, that's the highest amount of draw of power that you have in your home. That is the same here. At sunrise and sunset, solar and wind fail. We're stepping in to offset it with batteries because they're having such a draw at that kick-on, but the batteries can't meet that demand either, which is why you're seeing 900 of them being brought at one time, compared to right now where oil and gas are stepping in to offset that, and we're paying them to not produce it or meet that demand. And that's where Senate Bill 819 and its companion 1343 come in, because it's meant to base it off its own merit. Senate Bill 715 says, you produce the energy, we'll give you the subsidies. Quit basing it, so if you're claiming you're not the same as oil, gas, and nuclear, why should we give you the same money? There are ways to balance it out, and unfortunately 4363 is my favorite for House bill. That one's by my House Representative Money. And basically what that does, and it will likely never see the light of day, this legislation, I hate to say it, it hasn't even had a hearing, and it needs to be done by tomorrow, and it will likely never happen. What that one says is for every tax credit or incentive or subsidy that they get, they require to pay Texas that same amount. It levels it. They get away from all of their incentives. Unfortunately, we can call them and try to get it heard before Friday. It's just very unlikely it'll get done. And this is where security comes in. If you go to a Supreme Court hearing from about 4 weeks ago, you're going to see where they had a Supreme Court testimony in reference to cybersecurity threats for us. Our governor has an executive order, GA-49, stating that CCP China, or China in general, the People's Republic, have threatened to use our infrastructure and grid to harm us. This is why we had the meeting with them. With that said, we also have the congressional letter from Senator Rubio and 26 other Congress members stating these are a national security threat because they use Chinese-made components. Sorry, I blinked on the word. The testimony that was at the state or the government level, it was in reference to the fact that 90% of the components in solar, wind, and battery are manufactured in China, with at least one key component, typically the fire suppression system, being made in China, because no other entity has been able to make it. That being the biggest security threat we have to Texas and to our national infrastructure. The technology isn't ready. If it can't be made in America and it's made by someone who says they're going to use it to hurt us, especially one that's already had 2 cyber attacks against us, I say believe them. So.
Okay, I agree with just nearly everything that you said. The subsidization is the problem. We don't need to be paying for the promise of electricity. This code doesn't do one thing for that.
No.
This doesn't prevent that, stop that, anything else. That is a fight that I'm willing to take. That is something that, yes, the whole thing. There is the promise of the battery systems is continuity of the grid. We all lived through Winter Storm Uri and don't want to go through that again. And, you know, there is some potential there to alleviate symptoms like that. That is the positive thing that can come out of this. With that said, my concern is we're talking about going into this quite a process here with permits, fees, inspections, this, that, and the other. Targeted, and that's what we're doing here today. It's all because of the best systems or whatever.
They woke us up, yes.
That we're looking at this, and there is a lot of potential harm, potential negativity that comes out of the other side. As far as, has anybody in here ever worked with a government agency to try to get a permit or to get something inspected? You know what I'm saying? And it's, you know, in the words of Ronald Reagan, I'm with the government, I'm here to help, are the scariest 9 words in the English language. And I do take that somewhat to heart. I'm making light of that. Again, this is not about preventing BESS systems from coming in here or solar farms. We can't do that. We do not have the authority, ability, or power to do so. This is, where do we go with all of this? Every business, every home being built, all these things, this is a growth of government getting into people's lives.
So you work with firefighting, is what I picked up on. So when you go out into the field, do you trust your fire marshal to make sure everything goes well and everybody's safe? You know that your fire marshal, you can rely on him, right?
Sure.
So trust him. If he's telling you that this is a good call, that there is potential implication or backlash, and he's telling you this is actually going to help us in the long run, why not trust him now? Because there's not a fire? Because at the end of the day, there is potential harm in a lot of things. But at the end of the day, if you're too afraid to do it, that's one thing, because this may hurt something over here or something over here. But when the whole premise is safety and welfare, should the fear be the thing to stop you? Should the backlash? There is potential things, but that's where he's saying, let's discuss it. Let's figure out what works for us. Let's not do all of this. But here's another thing, personal property. As you said, it stops at the line. This isn't a chicken coop or a barn that can dilapidate and be left on the property. These are chemicals that have to be cleaned up. They have to be decommissioned. And what we're seeing a high thing happening here is these companies are coming in under LLCs, and they're making agreements under these limited liability. When they go under, the landowner is now responsible for cleaning that up, which, for instance, the one at my location near my home is $270 million to start decommissioning. That's not even including remediation. That landowner cannot afford that cleanup. So now that falls to the county. The county is now responsible for cleaning that up, which they can't afford, and this has actually happened multiple times in history. This can be verified. Your county now became a super fund to the state, because you will be required to pay back every penny that your county that EPA has to step in and clean up. And now it's not just that private property that's affected. Your real estate agents can't still sell real estate in your county. You cannot increase builds. You won't have a problem of permitting regulations because it won't be allowed.
But
because
is
you're a
there
super fund.
anything in any of this code that takes up that particular issue?
What it does.
What I would
Yes.
like to see is a decommissioning bond
Yes,
put
it's in
in
there.
place for
It's in there.
somebody to come in here. That's
That's in
in 855?
855.
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
1824, SB 1824.
That one's permits, regulations, and decommissioning.
Okay,
Decommissioning meeting.
and I'm not saying I'm opposed to the legislation. Again, I'm willing to fight this fight for this particular issues. My concern is with all of this going on here in Hood County are the implications that are far-reaching. We're looking at this, we keep going back to the BES, saying we want this because of BES, and I'm saying there's much more to this program than just that. We're growing government. We're creating more bureaucracy here with this, and that's where I want to tap the brakes on this.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking, I think, and I think you answered this question, that it can be tailored based on.
Yes,
The
actually, I
risk.
can even give
So-
you the direct cell phone number to the head of Texas for the ICC. I can give you his direct cell phone number. I can tell you that he will help you graft it based off of your specific parameters. For instance, one of our concerns was the sprinklers, which is why I knew what I knew. And he said there is a way.
Yeah, thank you for that, by
Yeah.
the way. That was good information.
I can't even give you it. You can talk to him directly. He will tell you how to manufacture it based off of your specific parameters that y'all are interested in meeting to not overflow into other areas. I guarantee you knew it. His name is Michael O'Brien. He will talk to you.
I think that, and I agree with Commissioner Andrews, we don't want to overburden the mom and pop from opening up a
No.
taco stand.
We're a small
or-
town, too.
or
We're smaller
a
than
dress
y'all's,
shop
actually.
Or a cupcake business or whatever.
No.
We don't want to overburden them with regulation, but we'd still have the responsibility to keep our public safe.
Right.
And I think that's where the balance is, as you said, this is new technology. We don't know all the implications. It does, because of wind and rain, and go out into other people's property. So we want to be sure that we're keeping the public safe, but at the same time, we don't want to over-regulate all the people that live in Hood County.
No,
and who want to start up a business or, you know.
And
We
I
are the
like
same
the
way.
idea of that being done through legislation.
Oh, yeah. I've been in Austin every week
I guess
for that.
maybe that's where I'm hinging here, is let's get the legislation in place. Let's get the TCEQ or whatever it takes. God.
We've met with
Can't believe I'm
TCEQ,
saying that
PUC.
out loud.
There's so many acronyms, to be fair, but
Yes.
you are correct. And right now, for instance, 1824, 1825, and their companions in the House have actually already made it out of committee. They're going to calendars. We don't know that they'll actually be seen. I don't know if you know what's all going on at the House. It's absolute insanity. And it just, honestly, we can't guarantee that is the problem. So there are other things you can do, and we're going to stick to fire codes, but there is additional, the 391 Sub-Regional Planning Commission is another thing that another Texas code that our commissioners are using. There are other things that specifically address safety, welfare, and concern. Now, to be clear, you're right, this does not stop the money, this does not stop the build at all. What this does is says, show us you did your UL testing and you passed it. Did they pass it before they bring the batteries to you? Because if not, the highest amount of fires happen at interconnection or in the first year. So before they bring them into your county, show me that they're ready to go. The additional, show me you can provide water, steady water flow to ensure that you can meet the demand should incident occur. An additional, show me site-specific emergency planning. Show me what we are expected to do when this happens, not a guesstimation, not an about. What are we specifically, based off of this distance of this fire personnel to this distance of hazmat, what do we do in our county to address this concern? That's what 855 does. It also makes sure that they're paying you for those permits. That's part of those fees. For instance, that's $300,000 on a $90 million build to your county. That helps. That offsets some things. That's not a mom and pop shop. They might look at $200 to $300, but it still additionally adds in the protection for your people. And then another thing the fire code can do, it can tell you, you can get the layout of their plans. So like, for instance, one of the things we learned is that our fire suppression system is made by CATL. CATL is that company that Rubio and them mentioned that it was a national security threat. Things like that to prepare you so that you fully understand what the inner workings are. That's what the 855 does. And here's the thing, if they are meeting all that, we're copacetic, everybody's safe, we have peace of mind, no more fear, right? We know what to do. But if they can't meet that, that's what you're seeing in Van Zandt County. Because if they're not gonna ensure safety, someone has to. And your fire marshal is willing to do that. And that's where you give him the ability to say, hey, look, I'm not against your company, I think it has potential, but you're too close to this structure right here, or you don't have proper testing done here. And that just enforces it. So again, it doesn't do everything we want it to do. We're not living in a dream world. We wish we were, right? But it does put checks and balances in place that we didn't have 6 months ago.
So, Fire Marshal, what is the process of the state when they adopted NFPA 855? Was that done through legislation? How does that happen?
I didn't dig into their process. I'm not sure how they did it.
State fire marshal, it's the state fire marshal. They choose to accept which ones they're going to accept.
Okay.
That's their role.
And Commissioner Andrews, if you remember yesterday at the tail end of our second meeting, that was one of the questions I asked about if they had a decommissioning plan. And that's when we heard about the whole repowering and re-permitting or whatever it was. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I picked up from my scanning through 855, trying to get an understanding, is that part of their planning requires a decommissioning plan. And that was the whole reason why I asked that question yesterday.
I wanted to ask you,
Is there anybody here that would like to speak that hasn't had an opportunity?
I just wanted to find out where this fee schedule came from.
Oh, Van Zandt.
That fee schedule was one that Kevin Palmer from Van Zandt sent me. This is not the one I want to adopt. This was just a sample.
My thoughts are, can we just make the permits so expensive that they don't want to come here?
No, I would not want to.
idea.
No, I would not want to make it unreasonable.
You don't want to miss anything, though.
Brad Yarbrough. What's it going to take to get you to move here and be employed with us? This woman's incredibly smart. Yeah, we're definitely going to get your name. Yes, thank you for coming out and speaking with us. My question is, so the state's already adopted this. We don't follow it. If we start following it, how can we grandfather people in since the state's already, you may know this, but I can't see how we can just pick and choose who we're going to let you grandfather it in when the state's already said, hey, you're supposed to be doing this. We just haven't been following it. My second question is, how does this affect residential?
So my view on the grandfathering, I wouldn't want to go to a business that already exists and tell them, oh, by the way, you're going to have to meet this, because they were under the understanding that they were doing what they had to do when they put their building in place in the first place. So
Like an ex post facto law.
yeah, for me to go back retroactively and say, oh, by the way, when you built this building, you should have had this, 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 and this, and now you're going to be required to do that, I don't think that's fair to the businesses or the community to go back and retrograde.
And I totally understand that, but if I was a business owner that was going to build a new building and I got to follow all this when we should have been following it all along, I'm going to say, well, this guy doesn't have to, here's a lawsuit. And that's what I want to keep from. I just don't see how we could get around that.
I think so that would be part of the permitting process. If they know in advance that these are the standards they're going to have to meet, then I don't see how you could then turn around and say, well, why is his not done? Well, the answer to that is he didn't know that that was the standard that had to be followed at the time. And for me to go back and then tell them, you're now going to have to meet that standard, even though it was your understanding when you built this project, those standards didn't apply. I don't know. I can see where we can ask them to be compliant and bring them up to code if they add square footage to their facility, if they change owners, if there's a fire or an incident that damages more than 30% of the building and the property, that when they rebuild that, it would have to be brought up to code. But going back and telling them retroactively that you're going to have to meet a code that you didn't know existed at the time when you built this, I don't see that as good business.
All right, and how does this affect residential? Is there going to be a fire code that they're going to have to, the builder's going to have to change?
So the only time that, and again, this is very early, I haven't spent a whole lot of time reading code yet to understand them. The only time fire code comes into play on residential is if it's over 5,000 square feet, I think. Or 6,000 square feet. So if you have a home that's bigger than 6,000 square feet, I think at that point it's required to have a residential sprinkler. I can tell you from talking to other fire marshals in South Lake, when they made that known, they started building their homes at 5,990 square feet to negate that requirement for a sprinkler, and then after the house is built, they'd come back and add a 500 square feet connected by a breezeway.
Okay, because I know in Austin, if you're going to build an add-on or a deck or something like that, it has to be WUI rated. So is that part of that code?
So now in Austin, if you're talking about inside the city limits of Austin, they
Yes.
probably fall under something altogether different, kind of like our city does.
Okay.
So the city has ordinances in place, and then because they have the ordinance, they've actually adopted the International Fire Code instead of NFPA. So the way I misunderstood that rule all along was that we had to have that population of 250,000 or more, or touch a county that does, if we wanted to adopt our own version of a fire code.
Okay, so there's no WUI rating in?
I don't even know what that is, to be honest with
It's
you.
the fire rating? It's,
Yeah, if it's, so we're not talking about developing a county ordinance.
okay.
It's not the same.
It's that same, okay.
Correct.
The law that the state gives us. Cities, they can pass ordinance and enforce them, so that's the difference.
Okay. All right, thank you.
There's
All right,
words in there,
let's
too.
take a break.
Read it.
Everybody's been going here. I think we're about workshopped out. I am. We got other people that had other meetings to come down here. But thank you again, Ms. White, for you coming down. You really helped us out here a lot.
Judge,
Now-
if I may, I was going to have Chief Griff here talk a little bit about the whole, what? Sorry, Greif.
I give you grief, but
You do give me grief, that's true. So he's a plans examiner and all that stuff in the city of Fort Worth, and he can kind of give you a little more explanation about how code and all that comes to play, I think, but I'm going to let him.
And he's the fire chief in Pecan Plantation.
Hi, how are y'all?
Good.
So, as Jeff said, I'm a lieutenant for Fort Worth Fire. Part of becoming a lieutenant, I had to go through Inspector 1, Inspector 2, and Plans Examiner. Lots of reading. I think some of the confusion I'm hearing today is some confusion on standards versus code versus law. So a standard set, people start following it, it goes to NFPA or International Fire Code or Building Code, and it becomes a code. Then y'all as county commissioners decide if you want to adopt that code into law. Unfortunately, since this county does not have 250,000 people, we can't make our own codes, we can't adopt our own codes, so we fall under the state codes. With that, though, the state gives authority to review plans, conduct inspections for fire and life safety hazards. They can require corrections and impose penalties under the state codes. So he has that ability right now to do it. It's just a decision on the staffing, the inspections, or you require yearly inspections, new construction only.
Can we pick and choose of the state code what we want to enforce?
So it takes a decision by the commissioner's court. You will appoint him as the fire marshal, and you say, hey, we want to do all new commercial property for, let's say, apartment complexes, people that are going to make money for business over 50,000 square feet. But as far as nitpicking one entity, no, sir. It's got to be kind of broad so that you don't get into the legal aspects.
I got you.
But you can set parameters.
You can't set parameters. We're only going to inspect things that are making money from housing people, i.e. residential apartment complex. They need to be sprinklered, standpipes, to any business that's greater than 30,000 square foot. We're going to inspect and enforce. But you can't say, oh, I'm only going to inspect battery plants, because then you get into your targeting. With that, the state of Texas, TCFP, does not require a minimum amount of fire marshals in the office. That is dictated by each authority having jurisdiction, i.e. county commissioners. So, and that's under chapter 233 of the International Fire Code and Texas TCFP code. So we fall under chapter 11 and chapter 233 are your two big chapters you want to read. Chapter 11 gets into your NFPA 855, your existing building codes, your fuel gas, residential, mechanical, plumbing, elevators, all that. Your chapter 233 is where you get into this more of the counties having 250,000 people, your ability to use the state adopted codes already. Any questions from there? It's just kind of a down and dirty.
That's local government code?
That is Texas code. That's going to fall under
Administrative code.
Administrative Code 233 and Chapter 11. But just so y'all know, there's, I believe, 81 counties that have the ability to set their own codes. They meet that 250,000. Out of that, only 22% have chose to adopt their own codes. It's a process. Most of them just use the state codes.
So what about the question of, I think that Ms. Brown and Mr. Yarborough both asked, so we have had this county has had a fire marshal with the authority to enforce these state codes because we're by default under those codes.
Yes, ma'am.
For several years, but we haven't been. So now if we start doing that, how does that?
I think Jeff answered it perfectly when he answered it. It's a permitting process from here on out. Any new construction, everybody else is grandfathered in. Any new construction goes through a permitting process where they get a certificate of occupancy. They get their building codes if we had building codes, and then part of that is a fire inspection or a plans examiner looking at it and then inspecting it to make sure it meets those codes. And you get, we do that in Fort Worth all the time. So every 3 years you adopt a new NFPA code. So next year, 2026, they're already sending out the codes, and I will tell you one of them is to increase the 855 to where facilities like the Rain Lily plant, they can't use clean agents, halon, stuff like that. They're going to have to go to like a F500 foam or more of a, I said that the other day. I've had a brain fart, sorry. They're going to have to change up their halon process, not use halon anymore. So they're going to have to go to like a F500 or deluge system on their batteries or circuit cutoffs.
A different type of suppressant.
Right. But a plant that's already built, or in this case, let's take the best plants out of this completely, and let's go with an apartment complex. Just because in 2026 we adopt a new fire code, we don't go back to somebody that built in 2023 and say, hey, now you have to do it. The only time we'll do that is if they do a remodel, and again, that's kind of set by the fire marshal and the county commissioners of if you're going to remodel and it's going to be more than 30% structural change or 40% or 50%, now you have to follow this new code.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I'm the floodplain administrator here at Hood County, and Code of Federal Regulations require me, we don't say grandfather, we say legally non-conforming for the ones that were built in the floodplain prior to having any kind of, so they have a substantial damage and substantial improvement clause. If they're damaged over 50%, it doesn't matter if it's by flood, fire, truck hitting it or whatever, then do they have to be brought, y'all have that in those codes that they have to be brought into compliance?
Yes, sir.
Even if, I mean, if they're adding a room on and it's more than 50% of the value of the structure, then I guess.
Yes, sir. And that's again set by Code of Federal Regulations.
We have Kimberly Burton.
Thank you.
I didn't plan to speak today. I just wanted, something came up and made me think this. If we go through with this, if this happens, if this BES is built, we need to expedite the portion of the MTP, the Master Thoroughfare Plan, pertaining to pecan plantation over any other. We need to prioritize that over any other portions of the Master Thoroughfare Plan, in my opinion, because we need to be able to have much faster fire response, which would go through pecan rather than having to go out the back gate and go all the way over and back in the back roads. And we also need to have the port, so we need to get that road built that goes out of pecan, the third gate out of the near the Johnson County. So we need to get that first, and then also we need to get the portion of the MTP going from the front gate of Pecan out to 377 as an escape route. So that's my thoughts on that. And also I wonder, this is way expensive, but wouldn't it be prudent to have a fire response on site, or at least nearby, where if there is a fire, it could be quickly, instead of like God knows how much time it would take to address it right now, but without the roads. But wouldn't it be prudent to build a fire facility near the plant so that we could get that addressed quickly? Thank you.
Thank you. Just real quick, if Pecan did a gate, because Pecan's a gated community, if they did a gate, wouldn't it have to be on their responsibility, not the county, to build an exit? Okay, that's all, the only question I had.
We have actually put out an RFP to hire a project manager that's looking into all the options, so.
Okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't a county's responsibility. I know if they build a gate out, if they want a road, that would be our responsibility. We'd have to vote on it, or yours, to build a road beyond the gate, beyond Pecan. But for an entry in and out, it's their responsibility, right?
That's our understanding at the current time, but
Okay.
that's why we hired some experts to help us with that.
Yeah, because in my neighborhood, I know we wanted to be a private community and to put up a gate, then we'd be responsible for all the roads. So I think Pecan falls under that same
Right,
purview.
it's a gated community.
Yeah, okay.
I had a quick question. I'm sorry, my name's Kimberly Burton, and I'm a Hood resident. Do we have a fire inspector for the county? Or is that the duty that falls under the fire marshal?
We haven't had anything to inspect against, so I don't have an inspection department, but I do have 2 part-time guys that are certified.
Okay, thank you. I know that y'all are familiar with this sign, and the reason I brought it was because several years ago I remember a saying, "Don't mess with Texas." And we were very proud of when that came out. I'm a born and raised Texan, and this just helped people remember not to trash up the highways, pick up your trash, take care of things so that we have a beautiful state. And I still believe in that. But unfortunately, I don't think that's what's happening with these energy utility storage facilities and the solar farms. So we've been talking about that for several years now. And I'll tell you what, some of these folks and the information they have is a really hard act to follow. So I won't make any points that I was really going to make, but I do want to leave you with this thought. Sorry, I'm short. You're asking so many families to move into this county where we have developments, we have new homes, young families. They are our future. And as, on a personal note, I'm a new grandma, and I'm seeing how important it is for us to take responsibility for what we leave our generations in the future. And like some of you said, we have a lot of important decisions to make, and some of this is new to us. And hopefully we can help each other learn and thank you for other counties, but this is not just a Pecan issue, but it is a state issue and an issue all over the United States. These accidents and fires are already taking place. It's not something we don't know if it's going to happen. It's already happening. And we need to take the responsibility and learn from each other and make sure that we set in place standards, codes, whatever the right terminology is, so that we can protect one another, protect our neighbors, and protect the rural areas, even Granbury, people in Granbury, the city of Granbury, like Ms. Highsmith said, if the air blows and the wind blows the right direction, there are thousands and thousands of people that could be affected by this. Glen Rose, Somerville, rural areas, De Cordova, I mean, there is no end. We have to remember to protect our populations. If these BESS facilities are going to be built by our neighborhoods and by our land, our ag, our rivers, we have to take responsibility. I've heard that word said so many times today. I've heard the word liability. But I haven't heard the most important word, which is lives. The standard of living should not be fear from something that's across the river or on the lake. We have the responsibility to protect lives and health. Unfortunately, this week, I had a brother-in-law pass away from being exposed to Agent Orange. And Mr. Andrew, you brought up a good point. The chemicals from the homes that burn are terrible. In California, people can't even go back into their homes, not from storage facilities, but from wildfires that burned their homes. And now their homes are polluted. So if you can times that by thousands, maybe millions, we don't know yet, we might not have to just leave our homes, but may not be able to go back to our homes, go back to take care of our livestock, or what else, our pets, anything else that we left behind. We have no idea how it would affect our homes. And like I said, Pecan is not the only neighborhood here. There are people that live on Abbey Bend and Mitchell Bend, and then De Cordova, right across the lake. We have to watch out for each other. And if that makes making a few uncomfortable decisions so that we can protect the population, and especially protect the people that are going to show up first, the first responders, they are the ones that are also going to be affected the most, their health, their safety, and everything that comes with that. I feel sorry for them almost, because if there were to be some kind of catastrophe, they're going to be the ones to put their life on the line, and they wouldn't even be able to do anything about it. And then the rest of their lives, they would be suffering from health problems, or if there was an explosion like there has already been at other locations, possibly be harmed right there on location while they're trying to protect the public. So having said that, I think we need to quit talking about liabilities and start talking about lives. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that everybody?
I don't really know if I want to add it or not, but I'm going to go ahead and add it. This is not talking about fire code, which is what this is about, but the statement was made that this company, EE, is putting so much money into this. Well, I just want to go over what's really going on with wind, solar, and these BESSes. So last year, there was $215 billion of subsidies that went towards renewables. So once that facility is operational, the solar with the BESS is operational, then they can
their cost for putting the facility in, they get that money back. It's not just the IRA. There's USDA, there's ERCOT subsidies. It just goes on and on and on. So that's our money. That's our money. That's not their money. That's our money. So I'm having a real problem with the whole thing.
With you in that fight, let's fight it.
Let's fight it.
I'm with
Thank
you with that, 100%.
This is the way to fight it, is to do what he tells you to do, because he knows. Please.
Well, I think if, just to, the purpose of this was to give Jeff some idea of direction. So rather than, I don't know, adjourn before we do something, my idea, of course, we can't have any votes or decisions here because this is a workshop, but what I'd like to see you bring to court would be some kind of a draft that has some high parameters, like the fire chief.
A draft of like the fee schedule and a permitting process?
Yeah, but, something high level so that it's not impacting every business, the mom and pops, and, to take into account Commissioner Andrews' concern of making this a overburdensome regulatory environment just to have a business here in Hood County, but on the same hand, making sure that we're protecting against the most critical risks.
Well, in truth be known, that was really the intent of me asking for this meeting in the first place, is to get guidance on how would you like me to proceed? I don't want to spend a whole lot of time and energy and effort putting something together that y'all think is a bunch of hogwash. So if that's the direction that we want to go, I will work on our own fee schedule and a permitting process and bring that to you and see and we can work through that process.
Here are a couple of just unintended consequences that have occurred to me during this meeting today. What about the small church that has meetings, twice a week? They come on Sundays, they come on Wednesdays. It's a small deal. Now they're strapped with an annual inspection, and they've got to pay to have somebody come out for a one room and make sure that the fire alarm is going off and the fire extinguisher works. That's a cost. That's something that I would like to protect against.
So that's where we evaluate the life safety risk.
Right.
So if it's a small church that can't hold more than 100 people, are we going to require that? If it's a mega church where they can seat 30,000 people, that might be something to consider.
So this is something that we can
scale up or down, however you
know.
want to give me that guidance. We can work through that process and go from there.
Okay, and the other example that I thought of, just sitting here, the lodge out in Lipan, they were on a demand meter for electricity. So
Okay.
they didn't do it. They pulled the meter out of that thing and said, we're going to run a generator out here in the back. You got 10 or 15, maybe 30 people show up in there. Is this something that...
So to put that into perspective, we have regulations for fireworks stands on where they can run generators, and there's not but 1 or 2 people in those. Of course, your risk hazard for having a generator malfunction next to a fireworks stand is probably a little higher potential than
Higher than the lodge,
than a meeting with 10 people in a building that's running their power off a generator.
But these are the things that a broad blanket brings underneath that I am very concerned. It's always Rush Limbaugh used to talk about the law of unintended consequences.
Good
and it's the unintended consequences, like I said, that got California where California is.
Right.
So I'm guarded against that, and I'm concerned for these things, and I want to make sure that we're not crossing lines.
So that being said,
With some of that.
with y'all's consent, I do have a video that's queued up, if you care to see it. And it was the Station nightclub fire that happened several years back in Rhode Island. It's a nightclub. How much life safety risk would you associate with a nightclub?
And where was that?
I believe it's in Rhode Island. It says it at the beginning of the video.
Did they have code at that time?
They did, and that building was required to be sprinkled, which they elected not to do. That building had an occupancy limit, which they exceeded. And so for those of you that haven't seen it or don't know anything about it.
I remember it on the news.
There was a band called Whitesnake that they had come, and they were a big 80s rock band. They had the place over capacity.
The stage, didn't the stage
They were using
fall?
pyrotechnics in their performance, and it caught the sound batting on the sides of the walls on fire. Over 100 people died in that fire because they couldn't get out of the building. There were people that were litigated against, like the security guards for the band, because they were turning people away from a backdoor exit, because that was for band use only. They litigated against the videographer that shot the video of him exiting the building, because by him taking the time to video that, it kept people from egressing quicker. And you can watch through his whole video. I mean, he walks out the door backwards, filming all these people trying to get out of this building, goes around to the side, you can see smoke already pouring back out, walks back around to the front of the building, and the doors of that facility were packed with people that could not move because the people in the back who are now being approached by this fire are pushing, trying to get out the exit because it was the only exit they knew. But over 100 people died in that exit way, and all of that could have been prevented with a sprinkler. So if that building was up to code, that's 100 lives that potentially would not have been lost. If you care, I've got the video queued. We can watch it now if you want. It's about 6 minutes. If you don't care to see it, that you can go onto YouTube and look up the Station Nightclub fire, and there's hundreds of videos and documentaries on that event.
I remember it. I saw it on the news over and over when it was happening. Unless anyone else wants to.
You got your work cut out for you,
Yes, sir.
but you're doing a good job, so.
I'm trying.
Good work.
I really didn't want
Right,
to
Ms.
step in this
Highsmith?
pile, but
I think you can do it, and I think you can address the concerns that, I mean, I have the same concerns, but that we don't over-regulate small businesses and make Hood County a place where people don't want to come and open a business. We want people to come here and open businesses. At the same time, we need to protect the
one thing I'd like
safety.
to add to that, in my conversations with Kevin Palmer, I told him that was one of the concerns that was expressed to me by a commissioner, that businesses would not want to come here. His explanation was that other businesses, the local businesses that are from here, they don't have any problem complying with fire code. And it makes their building actually more resellable, because if they're in compliance and their building is up to code and they decide, I'm done with this, I'm leaving, for the next company or business or person to come in and purchase that building, knowing that it's already in compliance, he says that has stimulated their growth in Van Zandt County. He said the ones that don't want to come are the big ultra companies that just want to throw a bunch of box stores in a place because they could care less whether or not the community survives or thrives or whatever. They're just looking for an investment to make money. So I'm not trying to run anybody out of town or discourage business or anything like that. My primary goal here is to protect the community, the citizens, and the property.
And with that, this workshop is adjourned. Thank you.